Admiral Jake Harrison stood at the bridge window of the UNS Defiant, watching the massive space station grow larger as they approached. Kepler Prime looked like a giant metal flower floating in the darkness of space, its arms reaching out in all directions. Each arm held docking bays for different alien ships, and right now those bays were full. The Galactic Council had called this meeting, and every major species in the galaxy had sent their best diplomats and military leaders. Jake turned away from the window and looked at his team. Kate Sullivan sat at the main table, reading through diplomatic files on her tablet. She was the best negotiator Earth had, smart and quick with words. Her red hair was pulled back tight, and her green eyes moved fast as she read. Next to her, Colonel Ben Carter studied tactical reports. Ben was a big man with gray hair and scars on his hands from the early battles with the Zephyrians. He knew war better than most people knew peace. Dr. Lisa Morgan sat across from them, looking at biological data about the different alien species they would meet. Lisa was young but brilliant, with short black hair and thick glasses. She understood how alien minds worked, which made her valuable in negotiations. Jake trusted all three of them with his life, and today they might need to trust each other with humanity's future. The war had been going on for 3 years now. It started when human colonists found a rich mining world in the Tau Ceti system. The Zephyrian Empire claimed the world was theirs, even though no Zephyrian had ever set foot on it. When humans refused to leave, the Zephyrians attacked. The war spread fast, with battles in 12 different star systems. Millions had died on both sides. Jake had fought in most of those battles. He had seen good ships blown apart and watched friends die in the cold darkness of space. He had also seen humans fight with a courage that surprised the aliens. The Zephyrians were bigger and stronger than humans, with natural armor and weapons. But humans were smarter and more creative. They found ways to win battles that should have been impossible. Now the Galactic Council wanted to end the war. They said it was hurting trade and making everyone nervous. Jake hoped they were right. Earth needed peace. The war was expensive, and human colonies were stretched thin trying to defend so many worlds. If they could get a fair deal, Jake would sign it gladly. The Defiant docked with a soft bump that Jake felt through the deck. The airlock opened with a hiss, and Jake led his team into the station. The corridor was wide enough for 10 humans to walk side by side. The walls were made of some kind of smooth metal that changed colors as they walked. Alien symbols glowed softly, showing the way to different parts of the station. They passed other delegations in the halls. The Drakmori walked in perfect formation, their blue skin gleaming under the lights. They were warriors by nature, and they respected strength. The Nexarians hurried past in small groups, their large eyes constantly watching for profit opportunities. They cared more about trade than territory. The Etherians floated rather than walked, their energy forms shifting between different shapes. They were the oldest species in the galaxy and thought they were the wisest. The negotiation chamber was huge, with a dome ceiling that showed the stars outside. Tables were arranged in a circle, with each species having their own section. The human table was smaller than most others, which Jake noticed but didn't comment on. They were the newest, members of the galactic community, so maybe that was normal. Chancellor Vexitar of the Alterian Republic stood at the center podium. He was tall and thin, with pale gray skin and large black eyes. His voice carried clearly through the chamber when he spoke. Alterians had been the unofficial leaders of the galaxy for thousands of years. They controlled the most star systems and had the biggest fleets. Vextar began by talking about the terrible cost of war. He mentioned trade routes that were closed and mining operations that had stopped. He talked about the fear that was spreading through peaceful worlds. Jake noticed that he didn't mention the human colonies that had been attacked or the civilians who had died. Then Vextar presented what he called a generous peace offer. Jake felt his stomach drop as he listened. Humans would have to give up all colonies beyond the Sol system. They would pay huge amounts of money to the Zephyrians for war damages. The human fleet would be limited to ships that could only defend Earth and the inner planets. Most importantly, all human military activities would be watched and controlled by the Galactic Council. In return, The Zephyrians would stop their advance toward Earth. They would not attack human ships that stayed in human space. They would consider the war over. Jake looked around the chamber. Representatives from other species were nodding in agreement. Some looked satisfied, like this was exactly what they had expected. Others seemed relieved that the war would end. None of them looked like they thought the terms were unfair. Kate leaned over and whispered in Jake's ear. Her voice was tight with anger, but she kept it low so the aliens couldn't hear. The terms were not about peace, she said. They were about making humans weak. If humanity agreed, they would never be able to grow or defend themselves properly. They would be trapped in their home system like prisoners. Ben's face was red with rage, but his military training kept him still. Lisa looked sick, like she might throw up. She understood alien psychology, and she could see what this really was. The galaxy was afraid of humans. They had grown too strong too fast, and the established powers wanted to stop them before they became a real threat. Jake asked for a recess to contact Earth. Vextar agreed, looking pleased. He probably thought the humans needed time to accept their defeat gracefully. The chamber emptied as different delegations went to their private areas. In their secure room, Jake made an encrypted call to President Steve Maxwell on Earth. The connection took a few seconds to establish across the light years. When Steve's face appeared on the screen, Jake could see the worry in his eyes. Jake explained the terms quickly and clearly. He told Steve about the reactions from other species and what Kate and Lisa had figured out. This wasn't really about ending the war fairly. It was about making sure humans never became powerful enough to challenge the established order. Steve was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked what Jake recommended. Jake looked at his team, seeing the same determination in their eyes that he felt in his heart. Humans had never been good at accepting defeat, especially when that defeat was unfair. Jake turned back to the screen and met Steve's eyes directly. His voice was steady and clear when he spoke. The terms were not acceptable. They were designed to make humans weak and dependent. If the galaxy wanted to end the war, they needed to offer real peace, not disguised surrender. Steve nodded slowly. He understood what that meant. If humans rejected this offer, they would be standing alone against potentially the entire galaxy. But sometimes standing alone was better than kneeling together. The call ended, and Jake looked at his team. They had a decision to make, and it would change everything for humanity. Kate straightened her shoulders and nodded. Ben cracked his knuckles, ready for whatever came next. Lisa took off her glasses and cleaned them carefully, thinking about what the aliens would do when humans said no. Jake stood up and adjusted his uniform. It was time to go back to the negotiation chamber. It was time to show the galaxy what humans were really made of. The negotiation chamber felt different when Jake Harrison walked back in with his team. The air seemed thicker, and the conversations between alien delegates stopped as humans took their seats. Chancellor Vextar stood at the central podium, his black eyes watching Jake with what looked like satisfaction. The Alterian probably expected to see defeated humans ready to sign whatever papers he put in front of them. Jake walked slowly to the human podium. Every step echoed in the quiet chamber. Kate Sullivan, Ben Carter, and Lisa Morgan followed behind him, their faces calm but determined. Jake could feel hundreds of alien eyes watching him, waiting to see how humans would accept their place in the galactic order. Jake reached the podium and looked around the chamber. He saw Zephyrian delegates in their heavy armor, their reptilian, faces showing sharp teeth and what might have been smiles. Drekmori warriors sat straight in their chairs, their blue skin gleaming under the lights. Nexarian merchants whispered to each other, probably calculating profits from the new trade arrangements. Etherian energy beings floated silently, their forms shifting colors slowly. The chamber was completely quiet when Jake began to speak. His voice was clear and strong, carrying easily to every corner of the huge room. He said that the United Nations of Earth had carefully considered the peace proposal presented by the Galactic Council. The human government had discussed every detail with their military leaders, their scientists, and their elected representatives. Jake paused and looked directly at Chancellor Vextar. Then he spoke the words that would shock the galaxy. After careful consideration, Earth formally rejected the proposal and was withdrawing from these negotiations immediately. The chamber erupted like a volcano. Alien delegates jumped to their feet, shouting in dozens of different languages. Vextar's pale face turned even whiter, and his large eyes grew wider. The Zephyrian war leader roared something that sounded like a threat. Nexarian merchants looked like they had just lost their biggest trade deal. Even the usually calm Etherians began pulsing with angry red energy. Vextar slammed something that looked like a gavel on his podium. The sound was loud enough to make everyone stop shouting and sit down. When the chamber was quiet again, he demanded to know why humans were making such a foolish decision. His voice shook with rage and disbelief. Kate Sullivan stood up and walked to the podium next to Jake. She had prepared for this moment during their recess. Her voice was cold as space when she began to speak. She said the proposal was not a peace agreement, but a surrender document designed to make humanity weak and defenseless. Kate explained each term in detail, showing how they would cripple human expansion and development. The territorial restrictions would trap humans in their home system. The fleet limitations would make it impossible to defend human colonies from pirates and raiders. The reparations would bankrupt the human economy. The oversight provisions would give aliens control over human military decisions. Then Kate dropped her biggest surprise. Human intelligence services had discovered that several Galactic Council members had been secretly helping the Zephyrians during the war. They had provided weapons, supplies, and tactical information while publicly calling for peace. The peace talks were not about ending the war fairly, but about finishing what they had started secretly. Kate pulled out a datapad and began reading names and dates. She had evidence of secret meetings, hidden supply shipments, and coded communications. Several alien delegates looked uncomfortable as she spoke. The Nexarians who had been selling weapons to both sides suddenly found their shoes very interesting. Some Alterian officials whispered urgently to each other. Dr. Lisa Morgan stepped forward next. She was smaller than the other humans, but her voice carried authority when she spoke about alien psychology and biology. She had studied Zephyrian behavior patterns for years, she said. Their species only respected strength and power. Any sign of weakness would encourage them to attack again, probably within a few years. Lisa explained that Zephyrians were natural predators who saw negotiation as a form of hunting. They would interpret human acceptance of unfair terms as proof that humans were weak prey. The proposed peace would not last because Zephyrians would eventually decide to finish what they started. The only way to achieve lasting peace with them was through strength, not appeasement. Colonel Ben Carter was the last human to speak. He walked to the podium with the steady pace of a career soldier. His voice was quiet, but everyone in the chamber could hear every word. He said the military restrictions in the peace proposal would leave human colonies defenseless against raiders, pirates, and eventually another Zephyrian attack. Ben had fought in every major battle of the war. He had seen what happened to human settlements that could not defend themselves. Families had died because help was too far away or too weak to matter. The proposed fleet limitations would guarantee that more families would die in the future. Ben looked directly at the Zephyrian delegates when he spoke his final words. Humans would rather die fighting for their freedom than live as slaves under alien control. That was not a threat or a boast, but a simple statement of fact about human nature. Chancellor Vextar's voice shook with rage when he responded. He said humanity was making the biggest mistake in their short history. The Galactic Council had offered them a chance to survive, and they were throwing it away out of pride and stupidity. If humans rejected the peace terms, they would face the combined might of the entire galaxy. Vextar stood taller and his voice grew louder as he spoke. The Zephyrian Empire would not stop at the outer colonies. They would drive deep into human space, burning every world they found. Other species would join them because humans had proven they could not be trusted to make reasonable decisions. Earth itself might burn before humanity learned to accept their proper place in the galactic order. The Alterian Chancellor pointed one long finger at Jake and spoke his final warning. Humans could not stand alone against the galaxy. No species had ever tried and survived. Humanity's choice was simple: Accept the generous terms offered today, or face extinction tomorrow. Jake looked around the chamber one more time. He saw alien, faces filled with anger, disbelief, and something that might have been fear. They had expected humans to be grateful for any chance to survive. They had not expected humans to choose uncertain war over certain slavery. Jake's response became legendary among humans and infamous among aliens. His voice was calm and steady when he spoke, like he was discussing the weather instead of humanity's survival. He said humans had been standing alone since they left their caves millions of years ago. They had survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and countless other disasters without alien help. They would manage whatever came next. Kate began packing the human documents and files into secure cases. Ben and Lisa helped her while Jake continued to stare at the alien delegates. The message was clear without words. Humans were done talking and ready to leave. The alien delegates watched in stunned silence as the humans prepared to go. No species in galactic history had ever walked away from Galactic Council negotiations. The idea was unthinkable. Species that defied the Council were conquered, enslaved, or destroyed. They did not simply pack their bags and leave. Jake turned toward the exit and his team followed. Their footsteps echoed loudly in the quiet chamber. As they reached the door, Jake stopped and looked back over his shoulder. He spoke one last time to the assembled aliens. Human colonies and Earth would prepare for total war, he said. Any alien ship that entered human space would be treated as hostile. Any alien government that supported attacks on human worlds would be considered an enemy. Humanity had tried to make peace fairly, but the galaxy had chosen war instead. The chamber door closed behind the humans with a soft hiss. Inside, hundreds of alien delegates sat in shocked silence. Outside, Jake led his team through the corridors of Kepler Prime toward their ship. Other aliens they passed stared at them with mixtures of confusion and fear. The UNS Defiant undocked from the station smoothly. Jake stood on the bridge and watched Kepler Prime shrink behind them. Kate was already sending encrypted messages to Earth and all human colonies. Ben was reviewing defense plans and fleet positions. Lisa was analyzing what the alien reactions told her about their next moves. Jake opened a communication channel to President Steve Maxwell on Earth. The message was simple and direct. Negotiations had failed completely and humanity should prepare for war against potentially the entire galaxy. The president's response was equally brief. Earth would be ready, and human colonies would not stand alone. As the Defiant jumped to faster-than-light speed, Jake thought about what they had just done. Humanity had rejected the easy path of survival through submission. They had chosen the hard path of freedom through struggle. The galaxy would learn what that choice meant, and humans would show them why some things were worth fighting for, no matter what the cost. The emergency session of the Galactic Council began 3 days after the humans walked away from Kepler Prime. Chancellor Vextar looked older than his many years as he faced the assembled delegates. The chamber buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from dozens of species discussed what humanity's rejection meant for galactic stability. Vextar called for order and the chamber grew quiet. He spoke about the dangerous precedent that humans had set by rejecting council authority. If other species followed the human example, the careful balance that had maintained galactic peace for thousands of years would collapse. The council's authority came from universal acceptance and humans had shattered that foundation. The Zephyrian war leader stood to speak next. His name was General Krex, and his scarred reptilian face showed his excitement at the prospect of unrestricted war. He said the Zephyrian Empire had been holding back during the negotiations, hoping for a peaceful solution. Now they could unleash their full military might against the stubborn humans. Krex's voice grew louder as he described his plans. Zephyrian fleets would sweep through human space like a cleansing fire. Every human world would burn until Earth itself begged for mercy. The other species would see what happened to those who defied galactic authority, and no one would dare follow the human example. Species after species pledged their support to teach humanity a lesson. The Nexarians offered their massive trade. Fleets converted for war. The Volantians promised their advanced weapons technology. Even some of the peaceful species agreed to provide supplies and logistical support. The galaxy was uniting against humanity in a way it had never united before. But as days passed and intelligence reports came in, the alien leaders began to feel confused and worried. The reports from human space made no sense according to their understanding of how defeated species should behave. Human colonies were not evacuating or surrendering as expected. Instead, they were digging in and preparing for siege warfare. More troubling were the reports of human technological development. Instead of preparing for defeat, humans seemed to be accelerating their research and development programs. New defensive systems were appearing around human worlds. Strange energy signatures suggested that humans were working on weapons and technologies that the galaxy had never seen before. On Earth, President Steve Maxwell worked 18-hour days coordinating the war effort. His cabinet had grown to include new positions focused entirely on the coming conflict. General Patricia Hayes took command of all ground forces, while Admiral Chris Morgan coordinated the space fleets. The attempted intimidation by the galaxy had completely backfired, uniting humanity in a way that no external threat had ever managed before. Dr. Elena Rodriguez became the most important person on Earth almost overnight. As chief scientist for Project Prometheus, she led teams of researchers working around the clock to combine human ingenuity with captured alien technology. The project had been running secretly during the war, but now it received unlimited funding and resources. Elena's teams made breakthrough after breakthrough in rapid succession. They developed new defensive shields that could absorb and redirect energy weapon fire. They created faster-than-light communication systems that allowed human fleets to coordinate across vast distances instantly. Most importantly, they found ways to combine technologies from different alien species in ways their creators had never imagined. The key insight came from studying how different alien technologies interacted with each other. Most species developed their technology in isolation, creating systems that worked well individually but poorly with other alien tech. Humans had been exposed to multiple alien technologies during the war, and human scientists had no cultural barriers preventing them from mixing different approaches. Captain Rick Turner became the face of human resistance during this period. His ship, the UNS Vigilant, led a series of daring raids on Zephyrian supply lines that kept enemy forces off balance. Rick used tactics that no alien military academy taught because they required the kind of creative thinking that humans specialized. Rick's favorite tactic was the false retreat. He would attack a superior enemy force with just enough strength to get their attention, then flee toward what looked like empty space. When the aliens followed, expecting an easy victory, they would find themselves surrounded by hidden human ships that had been waiting in asteroid fields or behind moons. The psychological warfare was even more effective than the tactical victories. Zephyrian commanders began to doubt their intelligence reports and second-guess their tactical decisions. They started seeing human traps everywhere, even when Rick's forces were nowhere nearby. The fear of human unpredictability became almost as damaging as actual human attacks. Human space became a maze of defensive positions, hidden bases, and mobile fleets that struck without warning. Every human world developed its own defensive specialties based on local resources and geography. Mining worlds created elaborate tunnel systems. Agricultural worlds used orbital mirrors as weapons. Research stations became floating fortresses, bristling with experimental weapons. The breakthrough moment came during the Battle of Rigel Station, a major trading post that both sides needed to control. Admiral Sarah Blake commanded the human fleet, and she faced a combined Zephyrian-Nexarian force that outnumbered her ships 2-1. According to every tactical manual in the galaxy, Blake should have retreated or requested reinforcements. Instead, Blake used the station itself as a weapon. Her engineers had spent weeks studying the station's fusion reactors and artificial gravity systems. During the battle, they overloaded specific sections of the station to create massive gravity waves that pulled enemy ships out of formation. Then they used the station's communication arrays as directed energy weapons, something no species had ever thought to try. The alien fleet found itself fighting not just human ships, but the station they were trying to capture, Nexarian trade. Vessels built for efficiency rather than combat suffered catastrophic damage from weapons they had never encountered. Zephyrian warships designed to fight other warships in open space could not adapt to three-dimensional combat around a massive artificial structure. Blake's victory was decisive and shocking. The combined alien fleet lost more than half its ships while human losses were minimal. More importantly, the battle showed that humans could not only defeat superior numbers, but could do it using tactics and technologies that the galaxy had never seen before. The news of Rigel Station spread through galactic communication networks faster than light-speed travel. For the first time since the war began, alien military leaders started to question whether defeating humanity would be as easy as they had assumed. The humans were not just refusing to surrender, they were getting stronger and more dangerous. With each passing week, Chancellor Vexitar received the battle reports in his private office on the Alterian homeworld. He had been confident that galactic unity would crush human resistance quickly and decisively. Now he was looking at casualty reports that made no sense and tactical analyses that described impossible human victories. The Alterian intelligence services brought him even more disturbing news. Several species that had pledged support for the war were quietly backing away from their commitments. The Drachmori were asking pointed questions about Zephyrian tactics and human casualties. Some Nexarian merchant houses were reportedly selling weapons to both sides, hedging their bets in case humans somehow survived. Most troubling were the reports from Etherian space. The ancient energy beings had withdrawn their support completely and were sending diplomatic messages toward human territory. If the Etherians, the galaxy's oldest and supposedly wisest species, were having second thoughts about the war, other species might follow their example. Vexitar realized that the galaxy had made a fundamental error in judgment. They had assumed that humans would behave like every other species when faced with overwhelming force. They would submit or be destroyed. Instead, humans had revealed capabilities and determination that no one had suspected they possessed. The Alterian Chancellor looked at the star charts showing human space and the fleets moving toward it. He had promised the Council that this would be a quick lesson that would strengthen galactic authority. Instead, it was becoming a test of whether the established galactic order could survive contact with a species that refused to accept its place in that order. For the first time since the humans walked away from Kepler Prime, Vexitar wondered if they might actually have the strength to back up their defiance. The thought terrified him more than any enemy fleet could, because if humanity could stand alone against the galaxy and survive, then everything the Council represented was built on foundations of sand. The war entered its most dangerous phase 6 months after the humans walked away from peace talks. What had started as a simple punishment operation against a rebellious species had become something that threatened the very foundations of galactic civilization. Admiral Jake Harrison stood on the bridge of his new flagship, the UNS Retribution, studying tactical displays that showed the largest human fleet ever assembled. The Retribution was humanity's newest and most advanced warship, built with technologies that Dr. Elena Rodriguez's teams had developed by combining alien systems in ways their creators never imagined. The ship's hull incorporated Drachmori armor techniques with Nexarian energy distribution systems and Zephyrian weapon mounts that had been completely redesigned by human engineers. Jake's fleet included over 200 ships, from massive battleships to small fighters, all equipped with the latest human innovations, but numbers were not his greatest advantage. It was the coordination made possible by instantaneous faster-than-light communication systems that no alien fleet possessed. Every ship in his fleet could share information and coordinate attacks in real time across light years of space. Colonel Julie Martinez had joined Jake's staff as Chief Tactical Officer. She was young for such an important position, but her understanding of three-dimensional combat in space was unmatched. Julie had developed the new human doctrine of fluid fleet combat, where ships moved constantly in complex patterns that confused enemy targeting systems while maintaining perfect coordination through their advanced communications. Admiral Frank Cooper commanded the fleet's support vessels from his own flagship. Frank was an old friend of Jake's who specialized in logistics and supply operations. He had solved the seemingly impossible problem of keeping a large fleet supplied during extended operations far from human territory. His supply ships could manufacture ammunition, spare parts, and even entire small vessels using raw materials harvested from asteroids and dead planets. Their target was the Zephyrian home system, But Jake's strategy was more complex than a simple attack. Instead of charging directly at the enemy capital, he planned to cut the Zephyrian Empire off from its outer colonies by capturing key strategic systems. This would force the Zephyrians to spread their forces thin, trying to maintain communications with their territories. The first major engagement came at the Kepler Nebula, a massive cloud of gas and dust that blocked most forms of sensor detection. Jake had positioned an entire battle group inside the nebula, waiting for the Zephyrian relief fleet that intelligence sources said was heading toward the contested border systems. Commander Alex Rodriguez led the hidden battle group from his heavy cruiser. Alex was Jake's nephew, but he had earned his position through skill and courage rather than family connections. His ships had been waiting in the nebula for 3 days, using the electromagnetic interference to mask their presence from enemy sensors. When the Zephyrian fleet arrived, they had no idea they were flying into a trap. The nebula's gas clouds glowed with beautiful colors as energy weapons discharged, creating a light show that could be seen from nearby star systems. But the beauty hit a one-sided slaughter as human ships emerged from concealment to destroy enemies who could barely see them coming. The third Zephyrian fleet was completely destroyed in less than 2 hours. More than 50 enemy warships were reduced to expanding clouds of debris, while human losses were minimal. Alex transmitted recordings of the battle to every human colony and back to Earth, showing that the seemingly invincible Zephyrians could be defeated decisively when humans chose the time and place of battle. On Earth, President Steve Maxwell faced increasing political pressure from some groups who wanted to negotiate rather than continue fighting. The war was expensive in both money and lives, and some politicians argued that humanity should accept whatever terms they could get before the situation got worse. But Senator Linda Foster led a strong opposition to any talk of surrender. Linda had lost her son in the early battles of the war, and she spoke with the passion of a mother who had sacrificed everything for freedom. She organized the congressional coalition that passed the No Surrender Resolution, which officially stated that humanity would accept nothing less than complete recognition of their sovereignty and the withdrawal of all enemy forces from human territory. The resolution passed by a huge margin in both houses of Congress, showing that most humans supported continuing the war despite its costs. Public opinion polls showed similar results across all human colonies. The galaxy's attempt to intimidate humanity into submission had instead created a unity and determination that surprised even human leaders. More importantly, the war was beginning to change the galaxy itself in ways no one had expected. Species that had pledged to help crush humanity were quietly reconsidering their positions as human military capabilities became clear. The Drakmori, who valued honor and strength above all else, began to openly question whether the war against humanity was just. Drakmori military observers had been present at several battles, and they were impressed by human courage and tactical innovation. When they saw human medical ships rescuing wounded Zephyrian soldiers instead of leaving them to die, the warrior species began to reconsider their opinion of human character. Some Drakmori commanders started providing intelligence to human forces, sharing information about Zephyrian fleet movements and defensive positions. The Nexarians were even more direct in their changing loyalties. Several major merchant houses realized that backing the losing side could be catastrophic for their business interests. They began selling advanced weapons and supplies to human colonies, often at prices lower than what they charged their traditional alien customers. Some Nexarian firms even offered to build ships for human fleets using their advanced manufacturing facilities. The most surprising change came from the Etherian Collective, the galaxy's oldest and most respected civilization. The energy beings had initially supported the Council's position, but their ancient minds had begun to see patterns that younger species missed. They recognized that humanity represented something new and potentially valuable in galactic development. An Etherian delegation arrived at the edge of human space carrying a message that shocked both humans and aliens. The Etherians formally withdrew their support for the war and requested permission to establish diplomatic relations with humanity. They offered to share some of their ancient knowledge in exchange for human insights into rapid technological development. Admiral Sarah Blake, now commanding the defense of the outer colonies, was the first human to meet with Etherian representatives. The meeting took place aboard her flagship in the neutral space between human and Etherian territories. Sarah was nervous about negotiating with beings who had existed for millions of years, but she found them surprisingly interested in human perspectives on growth and change. The Etherians explained that most galactic species reached a point of technological and cultural stagnation after achieving interstellar travel. They became satisfied with what they had and stopped pushing boundaries or taking risks. Humans were different. They continued to innovate and adapt even under extreme pressure, finding new solutions to problems that other species considered impossible. Sarah's response became famous throughout human space. She told the Etherians that humans had never learned how to give up, because their history was full of situations where giving up meant extinction. From ice ages to world wars, humans had survived by being too stubborn to quit and too creative to be stopped by conventional limitations. The alliance with the Etherians changed the strategic situation completely. Other species began to wonder if they were backing the wrong side. If the galaxy's wisest species thought humans deserved respect rather than conquest, maybe the war was not the simple police action that Chancellor Vexstar had promised. The final blow to galactic unity came when several Zephyrian frontier colonies requested protection from their own government. The Zephyrian military had become increasingly desperate as their losses mounted, and they were using harsh measures against their own people to maintain control. When human fleets offered protection to Zephyrian civilians, entire star systems switched sides. Admiral Blake found herself in the strange position of accepting the surrender of Zephyrian worlds and protecting them from Zephyrian fleets. She treated the surrendering aliens with the same dignity that she would want for human civilians, providing food, medical care, and protection from military reprisals. The images of human ships defending Zephyrian families spread throughout the galaxy faster than any military victory could. Species that had seen humans as dangerous aggressors began to understand that human strength was balanced by human compassion. The war was no longer a simple matter of established powers crushing upstart newcomers. It had become a test of what kind of galaxy different species wanted to live in. Jake Harrison received reports of these political changes while his fleet prepared for the final push toward the Zephyrian homeworld. The enemy was still dangerous and well-armed, but they were increasingly isolated as former allies abandoned them. The galaxy that had united to crush humanity was falling apart, and humans were emerging as a new center of power that offered partnership instead of domination. The end came faster than anyone expected, even the humans who had been winning battle after battle. The Zephyrian Empire, which had seemed so powerful and threatening just 2 years earlier, collapsed like a house made of cards when the final winds of war reached their homeworld. Admiral Jake Harrison's fleet hung in space just outside the Zephyrian home system, waiting for the enemy's response to humanity's final offer. The terms were simple and non-negotiable: complete withdrawal from all human territory, recognition of human sovereignty over their claimed worlds, reparations for war damages, and the establishment of a buffer zone between human and Zephyrian space. The Zephyrian government had 3 days to respond. If they refused, Jake's fleet would enter their system and finish what the aliens had started when they rejected fair peace at Kepler Prime. The irony was not lost on human commanders. The species that had once demanded humanity's surrender was now faced with the same choice they had tried to force on others. Chancellor Vexstar made one final desperate attempt to rally the remaining Galactic Council members. He called an emergency session and pleaded with other species to join a last great fleet that would crush the human rebellion once and for all. His words were passionate and his arguments logical, but the chamber was half empty when he spoke. The Drakmori had officially withdrawn from the alliance after declaring that humans had proven their honor through strength and compassion. The Nexarians were too busy negotiating trade deals with human colonies to care about military adventures that hurt their profits. The Etherians had already signed a mutual defense pact with humanity. Dozens of smaller species had quietly stopped, sending ships or supplies to support the war effort. When Vexstar finished his speech, the silence in the chamber was deafening. Finally, an old Altarian admiral stood up and spoke words that ended the Galactic Council's authority forever. He said the war had been a mistake from the beginning, based on fear rather than wisdom. The galaxy would be better served by learning to work with humans rather than trying to destroy them. The session ended with Vextar standing alone at his podium, watching delegates file out without making any commitments to continue fighting. The galactic unity that had taken thousands of years to build had shattered completely in less than 3 years of war, with a species that most aliens had barely heard of before the conflict began. On the edges of the Sol system, a different kind of fleet was gathering. Captain Susan Parker commanded the newest generation of human fighters, small ships equipped with breakthrough technology that Dr. Elena Rodriguez's teams had developed. The fighters were fast enough to dodge most enemy weapons and powerful enough to destroy ships many times their size. Susan had volunteered to lead the defense of Earth itself, knowing that Chancellor Vexitar might try one final desperate attack on humanity's homeworld. Her fighter squadron was small but deadly, and they had trained for months in the unique conditions near Earth's sun. They could use solar radiation and gravitational fields as weapons in ways that no other species had ever mastered. The attack came exactly as human intelligence had predicted. Vextar gathered every ship he could find for one massive assault on Earth, hoping that destroying humanity's birth world would break human resistance everywhere else. His fleet was huge but desperate, made up of ships from a dozen different species who had little experience working together. The Battle of Sol became the war's final and most decisive engagement. Susan's fighters met the alien fleet at the edge of the solar system, using hit-and-run tactics that prevented the enemy from forming proper battle lines. Meanwhile, Earth's orbital defenses and the system defense fleet engaged the main alien force in a battle that could be seen from Mars with a simple telescope. The human defense was so effective that many enemy ships surrendered rather than face certain destruction. The new human weapons were not just more powerful than older technology. They were smarter, able to adapt to enemy defenses in real time and coordinate attacks across vast distances instantly. Admiral Harrison arrived with reinforcements just as the alien fleet began to break apart. His ships had traveled from the Zephyrian border in record time, using new faster-than-light drives that made human fleets the most mobile forces in the galaxy. The sight of fresh human ships arriving when the enemy was already losing broke the remaining alien morale completely. The battle ended with the capture or destruction of most of the alien fleet. Vextar himself was taken prisoner when his flagship lost power and began to drift helplessly in space. The former Chancellor of the Galactic Council sat in a human detention cell, staring at walls and wondering how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. With their final military force destroyed, the Zephyrian government had no choice but to accept human terms. They agreed to everything Jake Harrison demanded, including the payment of reparations that would take decades to complete. More importantly, they formally recognized human sovereignty and agreed never to challenge human expansion again. President Steve Maxwell stood before the United Nations General Assembly to announce the war's end. The chamber erupted in cheers as he read the terms of the Zephyrian surrender. But Steve's most important announcement came next. Instead of joining the discredited Galactic Council, humanity would form a new organization called the Terra Alliance. The Terra Alliance would welcome any species that agreed to mutual respect, equal treatment, and cooperative development. Unlike the old council, which was dominated by ancient powers who made decisions for everyone else, the Alliance would give every member an equal voice regardless of their size or age. The headquarters would be built at a new space station that humans would construct using the most advanced technology available. Director Paul Stevens took charge of the new Human Colonial Authority, which would oversee the rapid expansion of human territory that was now possible with the war ended. Paul had been Steve Maxwell's campaign manager before the war, but he had proven to have an excellent understanding of interstellar politics and colonial development. Species across the galaxy watched in amazement as humanity transformed from a besieged defender to a major galactic power in just a few months. Human technology, proven effective in combat, became highly sought after for peaceful purposes. Human diplomatic methods based on equality rather than domination attracted species tired of being dictated to by the old powers. Admiral Jake Harrison found himself promoted to Fleet Admiral and given command of all human military forces. His first order was to begin construction of the largest space fleet in galactic history, not for conquest but for exploration and defense. Human ships would patrol trade routes, protect smaller species from pirates, and explore unknown regions of space. Jake stood on the observation deck of humanity's newest space station, watching construction crews work on the expanding structure. The station would be humanity's first major contribution to galactic architecture, designed to be both beautiful and functional. Representatives from dozens of species had already requested permission to establish diplomatic offices there. Lieutenant Mark Johnson, Jake's aide, joined him at the observation window. Mark had been with Jake since the early days of the war, and he had seen firsthand how quickly things could change when a species refused to accept limits on their potential. He asked Jake if he thought the galaxy would ever truly accept humanity, as equals rather than newcomers who had gotten lucky. Jake smiled and pointed toward the construction work continuing outside. The galaxy hadn't just underestimated human military capability, he said. They had underestimated human resilience, creativity, and most importantly, the transformative power of a species that refused to bow down to anyone. The aliens who thought walking away from their negotiation table meant humanity was giving up had learned a hard lesson. Humans hadn't been giving up. They had been going to build their own table and invite everyone who believed in equality to sit at it. The war was over, but humanity's real work was just beginning. They had proven they could fight for their freedom and win. Now they had to prove they could use that freedom wisely, building a better galaxy where no species would ever again be told to accept slavery disguised as peace. The galaxy had been shocked when humans walked away from truce talks that were designed to humiliate them. But the bigger shock was what humanity built after walking away. A new kind of galactic civilization based on respect rather than fear, cooperation rather than domination, and the revolutionary idea that every species deserved the chance to reach for the stars without asking permission from anyone. As construction continued on the growing space station, representatives from hundreds of worlds sent messages requesting information about joining the Terra Alliance. The species that had once tried to cage humanity were now asking to learn from them. The galaxy would never be the same again, and, for the first time in thousands of years, that was a very good thing.